Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Starting off in Ottawa, where the House of Commons Indigenous Affairs Committee focused on the Wetsuwet'en crisis. One theme that was more about rights and title than about a pipeline, but another theme is whether or not the voices of women have been silenced in all of this. APTN's Todd Lamoran begins with a terse exchange between the committee's vice chair and Minister Carolyn Bennett.
Conservative MP Jamie Schmel grilled Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett over meetings that she attended last week and whether elected chiefs or the Wet'suwet'en matrilineal coalition were present.
If you're only hearing from one side against a project that you're negotiating title, which has impacts, again, you're leaving out the other side. But I won't dwell on that because we have only a minute left.
Jamie, I don't think you heard me. I said the matriarchs were there. I heard from each of them on Thursday.
Why weren't they there at the beginning?
That was the beginning. They were right there at the first.
We're hearing a witness that is saying
when I arrived,
they're saying you're
the matriarchs were in the room.
And they were told to leave.
The matriarchs each spoke. Now,
so they weren't there for the whole discussions. They weren't there to discuss anything.
Had a voice, and the process.
How do they have a voice if they're not there?
They were there,
Jamie.
at the
beginning, then they were removed.
They were there.
No, the third day.
No, they weren't removed.
Bennett also said hereditary chiefs met with pipeline supporters last Friday.
So you weren't there, Jamie. So why don't we get on with how we're going to go forward?
However, hereditary sub-chief Teresa Tate-Day said she had not been invited to any meetings.
In fact, a few of our hereditary chiefs met with the male chiefs that morning on the February 28th, and we asked them what was their intention. They did not share that with us.
She said small clan meetings of 20 people were making decisions on behalf of the whole nation, and that 5 male hereditary chiefs and environmental protesters had hijacked the issue.
It's about our people getting a resource and a benefit from our land, in which we went to court for. And protesters have actually hijacked our processes, and they have left women out and the community out of the discussion.
Tate-Day also testified that she has yet to see an agreement in principle over rights and title between hereditary chiefs and the federal government. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Upheaval within the Metis Nation continues as two factions hold simultaneous but separate meetings. On one side, the Metis National Council holds its Métis Identity, Citizenship and Homeland Conference in Saskatoon. On the other, the Métis Nations of Ontario, Saskatchewan and Alberta meet in Gatineau, Quebec for their conference on Métis self-government. A rift between leaders from the Prairies and Ontario over Ontario's citizenship practices is at the heart of these competing conferences. We begin with those in Gatineau. Here's APTN's Jamie Pasha-Gumscombe.
The conference was called Otipimisoak, which means we own ourselves. It comes after the milestone agreement with Canada in June. Métis Nation of Ontario President Margaret Froh says it's the first time Canada has formally recognized the Métis as a nation.
As governments, which is something we've been saying forever, but it's also a path forward on how we can move forward to achieve full recognition of self-government in Canada. And the beautiful thing about these core self-government agreements is we have them now. They're ours. No one can take those away.
This week also marks the first time the Métis of Alberta, Saskatchewan and Ontario came together to discuss self-government. Glenn McCallum, president of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, says collaboration is essential.
It's too long when people talk about reconciliation. It's too long that we've been left on the sidelines. Not anymore. But we do have rules and democracies that are happening in the 3 provinces, and that's what we use to be able to move forward, engage with our people in a proper way, so they are part of the process.
The group says they are navigating uncharted territory. They say negotiating is the easy part. Implementation will be the real challenge. Audrey Poitras is the president of the Métis Nation of Alberta.
We will all be now going back into our communities and doing that work that we need to do to implement that agreement. So in Alberta, we have a Constitution Commission in place. We've brought some of the commissioners. We're going to start going out to the community engagement sessions where people will now have been able to see this. And it's working. If my phone is telling me anything, it's been dinging all morning. So people are listening and are excited about what we're bringing back home to talk about.
Jamie Pasha-Gumscombe, APTN National News, Gatineau.
As mentioned, that's just one of the Métis gatherings going on separately. The other, hosted by the Métis National Council, is in Saskatoon. APTN's Priscilla Wolf is there.
At the National Conference on Métis Citizenship, one group that was notably absent was Ontario. David Chartrand, president of the Manitoba Métis Federation and vice president of the Métis National Council, says the Métis Nation of Ontario has created a division because they are not following the 2002 agreement on Métis identity.
Ontario should do the right thing. If not, then we cannot move forward on our agenda. If Ontario is still part of our council, part of our ongoing development, and they still are bringing new people constantly in, that will break every aspect of the process. And the true Métis citizens of Ontario that belong in the western part, northern part of Ontario, they say the same thing. We've now been assumed by these people that aren't us.
Chartrand also says Ontario is allowing too many members to join.
We're only 400,000 people. It don't take long before they're 500, 1,000, 1 million, I'm sorry, on and on and on. Then we'll be swamped. And so we must protect it at all costs.
Former MNC president Jim DeRocher, who is now the Métis president of local Isla Crosse, says that in 2002, all of the Métis National Council agreed to what the definition of Métis identity is. And now Ontario is making it more lenient for registering Métis in the province. And for that, he says Ontario is no longer part of the National Council.
And they haven't done so. They choose not to do that. And the consequences are that they are no longer part of this of the Métis National Council.
The conference ended today, and the status of Ontario is up in the air as there was no formal resolution to kick the province out of the National Council. Priscilla Wolfe, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
The Métis National Council is expected to hold its annual General Assembly next month. That's when a new president is supposed to be elected to replace longtime and outgoing President Clément Chartier. But with the divisions in the Métis Nation, that election could be in jeopardy. With more, Dennis Ward is standing by with the spokesperson for the Métis National Council, or current spokesperson. That's David Chartrand. Here's Dennis.
Thanks, Melissa. President Chartrand, a spokesperson for the Métis Nation Saskatchewan, put out or commented to us that this isn't a sanctioned event by the majority of the Métis National Council and not the meeting that they had called for. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let me start off by firstly thanking Dennis and APTN for being here. I think it's important that people get to see these discussions that are taking place on all the APT land across our nation, understanding the implications of what it is that we're talking about. And if you look at those individuals that say, I heard the president speak that this is not a General Assembly. It is not a General Assembly. It's a meeting, an informative meeting for people to understand the discussion that's so pivotal right now amongst our nation, that's probably causing a divide in the nation about Métis Nation Ontario citizens that they now call Voyageur Métis, which are not our citizens, but are being allowed to be Métis Nation Ontario citizens of a nation, of the Métis Nation. So this informative meeting that's taking place here really sets the stage, I think, for people to better understand. We have local leaders, we have provincial leaders, we have national leaders, but we also have citizens themselves, families that have come out to hear and see what's happening. So it is very, I think, set forth the pathway towards how we need to address this, look at it, because I think people, as we said in some of our speeches, this is going to affect us not only 10 years from now, 20 years from now, probably 50 years from now. So these decisions that we're making now is going to have a long, long impact for the next generation, and we make sure we get them right.
You're the national spokesperson for the Métis National Council. You mentioned the divide. We have this gathering going on, Métis Nation of Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta meeting in Gatineau. What does this mean for this planned AGA and the election of a new president for the first time in a generation?
For me, Dennis, the first point is that why would they go to Gatineau, Quebec if they knew we had a meeting here March 9 and 10? We called a meeting before them, and it's a proven fact, and I asked them to show me a document anywhere that they publicly called the meeting March 9 and 10 in Gatineau, Quebec. They cannot produce a document of that nature. So we had called a meeting that they demanded a meeting. So we gave them one right in the heartland of our nation in the prairies. And so March 9 and 10 was properly selected for them to attend. Instead, they said, well, no, we had a meeting planned in our minds that we were going to have it March 9 and 10. They could have made revisions if they wanted to. But why in Gatineau? Why didn't they have it here next door somewhere in another hotel, and then they could come back and forth to the two sessions, or have it the days 11 and 12, so we can have a proper discussion. We would attend those meetings. So from that perspective, you look at it, it's very important that this information session that's coming and happening right now, where the people are entitled to come and listen, need to understand if we're going to have an election in April, we need to decide where does Ontario sit in that process. If Ontario is allowed to continue to bring all of those people in, which they call the voyageur Métis now, which they're just voyageurs, French-Canadian, Algonquin, Ojibwe connected, not to us. If they are allowed to sit at the table with those 5 votes and affect the nation and making decisions from non-Métis Nation citizens, then we have a problem. We need to have an assembly that first debates the issue. Is MNO suspended? Is MNO part of this process? They want those answers. Let's have an assembly dealing with that. But they're saying we will not have a meeting unless MNO is treated equally, has the votes. If we have a board of governors, they must vote equally. And so all they want to do is outnumber the process and then change the process, change an MNC, change its bylaws if necessary, or change the process of policy. So this can't happen unless we debate as Ontario in or Ontario out.
So just a quick answer here. Is the election of a new president going to take place next month?
I'm hoping it takes place in April. And but before we have the election in April, we need to debate Ontario. Is Ontario part of the Métis Nation based on the fact they're breaking the process of our definition? They're not abiding with the definition, and our people loud and clear here have basically stated they need to follow that rule. So if we can't have an election until we follow it on and debate the Ontario issue. And once that's happening, I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, we will have that debate amongst a general special assembly. Then we'll have an election of our president.
President Chartrand, appreciate your time. We'll send it back to Melissa in Winnipeg.
Thanks, Dennis. There's certainly a lot to watch in the next month or so within the Métis Nation, and certainly lots on the line. We've got to take a break, but when we come back, part 2 of our Perspective series on Métis settlements in Alberta, the only province to recognize these communities. Let's take a look.
I'm Chris Stewart. Coming up, part 2 of my stories on the Métis settlements in Alberta. We look at the Prairie Métis settlement and how they came together after a devastating fire destroyed homes and their livelihood. That's coming up on the APTN National News.
On the East Coast, we've got 2 in Cloud and Fredericton, 5 and some rain in St. John's. Inukjuak, sunny skies, minus 22. Same with Kuujjuaq, minus 14, mix of sun and cloud and rain. Sept-Îles, mix of sun and cloud and minus 5 degrees. Montreal, 2 and sunshine. Toronto, 3 and rain. North Bay, minus 2 and some snow. Sioux Lookout, 1 and snow. Kapis Casing and Timmins, minus 2 with a mix of sun and cloud. Minus 6 for Puckatawagan and Thompson, snow there. Minus 1 in the Paw. 4 for Gimli and Winnipeg, 5 in cloud and Brandon. 7 for Swift Current, sunny skies. Same with Regina. 3 in snow in Saskatoon. 1 in snow in Meadow Lake, minus 5 and snow in Stony Rapids. 0 and snow in La Ronge. Welcome back. In part 2 of our Perspectives on Métis settlements in Alberta, video journalist Chris Stewart talks to the people of Prairie. They talk about the fire that changed their community and how they came together to move forward.
The West has seen more than its share of forest fires lately. In May 2019, a massive fire south of the town of High Level jumped over the Peace River and burned its way to the Prairie Métis settlement. The settlement was evacuated, except for a few who stayed. Dean Descharmes was made the Director of Emergency Management.
That fire was so big, so intense. We actually tried to get close to it when it was hitting the north end of Paddle Lake. It was hitting the houses. Those houses were burning up in 5 minutes. Like that fire was so intense. It it rolled on top of the trees. They could see it 200 feet in the air above the tree line.
15 homes were destroyed, but no one was hurt. However, the main loss was the forest itself. More than half the settlement's area was gone. Greg Callahoo was the chair of Prairie Métis Settlement. He passed away in November. He spoke to APTN before he passed.
And we're feeling the impacts now. It's hunting season. There's no place for us to hunt on settlement. You know, it's all burnt. We had a lot of moose. We never ran out of moose here since 1939. We've lived here. We've harvested the moose and they sustained us. Now we have to go off settlement to hunt, and there's no moose.
Herb Blair is the president of the Métis Settlements General Council.
But the real loss is the loss of those trees, the loss of our culture, 100 years of learning where the salt licks were, where the medicines were. You know, this is the loss.
And the loss of tens of millions of dollars in lumber. Callahoo felt the Alberta Sustainable Resource Development did a poor job fighting the fire.
The people that burnt out, they lost everything. You know, the rest of us, we all feel for our friends and our neighbors. You know, we were all hurt by this. Like, everybody felt that they destroyed our land. You know, that should have never happened. You know, if SRD and the people contained it off settlement, we would have never lost what we did.
One of the people burnt out was Les Newski. He had lived in his house he built for 30 years.
Last time I trapped, I got 28 marten, and that's without skidoo, just walking. And that's just worth over $3,000. Now everything's gone. Listen, you don't hear a bird.
Newski shows where his house once stood.
Right here was my living room. I look here to the highway, and there's my back porch. My patio out here. In the fall, I could sit out in my patio at night and listen to wolves back here. You know. Get up in the springtime, see the ducks and geese in my front of my house here, and nothing here now. Just a pile of ash is what I came home to.
He says he remembers how it felt seeing his destroyed home for the first time.
It's like you got a blow in the side of the head or a kick in the gut. You know, you don't believe it till you see it. You know, you look in here, and all my appliances in the bottom of the basement, and everything smells of smoke.
The Métis Settlements General Council approved $3 million from the Futures Fund to pay for rebuilding. They say the federal and provincial governments have not given a cent.
We're very thankful that the All Council, the 40 councillors, came together and they asked for $3 million out of the future fund of the Métis settlements so that we could ensure that those 50 to 60 people who had now just become homeless, when winter comes, like it's come, that they have homes that they can move into.
All but one of the destroyed homes has been replaced. The last will be ready in the spring. Newski is proud of how the people have come together after this tragedy.
This is a great community. I've lived, born and raised here. I'm proud to say this is my community.
Tomorrow we look at a day in the life at the East Prairie Métis Settlement. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Paddle Prairie Métis Settlement.
If you missed part 1 of our Perspective series on Métis settlements in Alberta, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Winnipeg-based artist activist Victoria Redson is our guest on a new episode of Face to Face right after the news tonight. Redson was one of a handful of people arrested near the Wetsuwet'en Healing Centre during an RCMP raid on Wetsuwet'en territory back on February 10th. Here's a clip from her sit-down with Dennis Ward.
With my own arrest, it just showed what RCMP is truly there for. They're there to protect industry. They're there for profit. They're not there to protect the people. Even though they say that they're there for our safety, if you watch all the videos of the RCMP at the Wetsuwet'en territory, they're not there for our safety. They're there to get this pipeline through.
In northern Alberta, we got -6 for Fort Chip and high level and snow there. 1 and sunny for Red Deer, 9 and cloudy for Medicine Hat. 8 for Penticton and Kamloops, cloudy skies, 9 for Victoria and Vancouver. -3 and sunshine for Dease Lake, 1 in Prince George. -20 and snow for Dawson City, -22 and snow in Old Crow. -21 and snow for Norman Wells. Wattie, -16 and snow. Tuktoyaktuk, -28 and snow, -29 and snow in Sags Harbor. Baker Lake, -22 and snow. Chesterfield, mostly sunny and -21. Joe Haven, -31 and clear skies, -27 in Igloolik and clear, -25 and clear for Pangerton. Welcome back. A survey of University of Winnipeg Indigenous students on the topic of racism has been released, and the results show that students there experience very high levels of racism in the city. APTN's Daryl Stranger has those details.
To me, that people still feel it's okay to be deprecating to Indigenous people.
A study on racism for Indigenous students in Winnipeg was long overdue, says the study's author Jacqueline Romano, an associate professor at the University of Winnipeg.
I mean, I wanted to show once and for all that racism is a problem in Winnipeg. I don't want people arguing whether or not it exists. I mean, that's kind of pointless. By speaking to the students and getting them involved, it helps me understand the kinds of experiences, so that at university we realize that when a student comes here to learn, an Indigenous student is walking through minefields basically on the streets to get here.
Romano based her study on similar research done at the University of Alberta. She also compared her results with studies done with African American and Latino communities in the U.S. Her study showed that 37% of students reported discrimination 4 or more times in a restaurant or store, and nearly 50% said they faced racism 4 or more times in a public setting. 25% also said they faced racism from police or by the justice system. Charlene Moore is an Indigenous master's student at the University of Winnipeg who says she has seen racism firsthand at her own school.
I did find that students' and professors' attitudes were that Indigenous students were, given handouts to be going to school, and that they weren't struggling as much as the other students, and that Indigenous students were more privileged than the other students. So there was sort of this animosity towards us sometimes.
Romano and Moore hope the study educates and enlightens people to the amount of racism in the city and be a catalyst in helping decrease the problem. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The cancellation of the Arctic Winter Games means that 270 participants from Nunavut will not be making the trip to Whitehorse. And it wasn't just athletes. Team Nunavut included coaches, cultural participants, and youth ambassadors from 22 different Nunavut communities. Just last week, Nunavut Ministers for Community and Government Services, Lauren Kusagak, was on hand to unveil the 2020 Team Nunavut uniform. The athletes can keep the uniforms and the swag, but Kusagak is stuck with a bill for an event that isn't happening.
We've spent about $250,000 that was used for uniforms, pins, insurance of the athletes. We've spent about that much, and that's all we've spent so far.
Of course, that's so sad that such an incredible event had to be canceled for sure. We were certainly at APTN looking forward to the Arctic Winter Games. We are out of time for your news tonight. Stay tuned for Face to Face with activist Victoria Redsun right now. And tomorrow, be sure to tune into In Focus at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be talking about a new initiative that's blending modern medicine and traditional healing, a racial profiling incident in Winnipeg where a businesswoman was suspected of being a drug trafficker in what should have just been a routine traffic stop, and why do Métis settlements only exist in Alberta? We'll get into all of that tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central Time on APTN In Focus right here on APTN. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.